Hello and welcome to the first full episode of The Fearless Hour, a time for saving graces. My name is Patrick Miller and I'm the founder and producer of this, the first spiritual but not religious video variety show. Here with me, or there in Chicago actually, is my co-host, Dr. Tameer Siddiqui.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Each episode of The Fearless Hour is devoted to a saving grace or a quality of our self-awareness that can help us get through these trying times. For our first full episode, the saving grace is courage, which we seem to need a lot of these days. For instance, we need the courage to wear masks in public, which is really the courage to care about others as well as ourselves. The courage to spend more time in isolation than we're used to, especially in the current holiday season.
The courage to keep showing up to work if you're an essential worker, or the courage to keep looking for jobs if you're on unemployment. The courage to face unusual levels of stress, anxiety, and grief over the long haul. Did you know that right now we are living at a time where over half of the adults in the United States have reported that their mental health has been negatively impacted due to worry and stress over the coronavirus? The prevalence of depression symptoms in the US alone has increased more than threefold during the COVID-19 pandemic. There's also evidence suggesting an increase in domestic violence and child abuse cases. So it certainly takes courage to acknowledge what you or others might be going through during this time. Asking for help or reaching out to help when needed is one of many ways right now we can be courageous.
In this episode, we're going to approach the quality of courage from a number of different angles. Instead of giving you a single definition of courage or one method to maximize it, we're going to give you a bunch, both in the direct way of words and in the more indirect way of some really good music. We hope that one or more of the ideas or feelings of courage that we'll be conveying will stick and will be helpful for you. Dr. Tameer and I will each give our thoughts on courage, and we'll also share about 15 minutes of a conversation between Tameer and the fearless literary author Corinne Zupko, who wrote the award-winning book From Anxiety to Love, which is published by New World Library. Corinne knows anxiety as well as anyone, and she got her start long before the current pandemic. We'll also enjoy three song videos from our guest musician, Carsie Blanton, whom I will introduce shortly. Finally, we'll have an audio-visual meditation featuring my photography and a song by the London musician Natasha Miren, who also provided the soundtrack for the meditation at the end of the pilot episode. In the description appearing below this video, you'll see a schedule that tells you when the different parts of the show begin. We know that attention spans are short in the digital age, and we've packed a lot into this hour, more or less an hour. Using the schedule, you can revisit any sections you'd like to watch again or pick up where you left off earlier.
Please help us out by hitting the subscribe button and spreading the word to your friends about the Fearless Hour. You can also go to the show's webpage on the Fearless Literary site, which you'll find at www.fearlessbooks.com, and put your name on the show by becoming a contributor or advertising sponsor. That will help us continue to bring you more saving graces in the weeks to come through our messages and with interviews and great music. Let's start on the saving grace of courage by meeting singer-songwriter Carsie Blanton.
I'm very happy to be here with Carsie Blanton. a singer recently of New Orleans, but now I hear from Pennsylvania, native of Virginia. I discovered Carsie not long ago when John Prine died. And I was going through the modern grieving ritual of getting on the internet and looking up everything I could find having to do with John, and found Carsie's wonderful tribute to him called Fishin' With You, which will appear a little bit later in the show. And I've developed a theory, Carsie, that you're actually a pre-incarnation of John. That even though you were alive for what 30 some years while he started pre-incarnating. He got ahead of the game.
Well, I have a related theory, because after I wrote that song "Fishing with You," that weekend I got a really bad toothache and I had to have my wisdom teeth taken out. And my theory was that it was because John Prine's wisdom fell on that's why I have one of my wisdom teeth. It's John Prine's.
Great.
I keep it on my writing desk just in case.
So tell us a little bit about where you come from and what your influences are. I can't quite figure out if you're Americana or blues or folk or
Me neither, Patrick. It's a struggle. I think that probably the reason is that I have a fairly wide palette of influences. So I grew up in a house that my dad is a real devotee of John Prine and always has been, and also Chris Christopherson, and to a lesser extent, Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and guys like that. So that was what was being played in my house growing up. My mom is also a songwriter, and she loved all those great Americana records of the, so like Lucinda Williams and Steve Earle and Gillian Welch Patty Griffin were all being played in my household growing up. And then when I was a teenager, actually when I turned 13, my grandpa, who was a big jazz fan, sent me a bunch of jazz records for my birthday. And that was sort of my branching out as a teenager. My wild phase was involved listening to like Billie Holiday and Nina Simone records. So those are kind of the two big areas of influence for me. I love folk and Americana, and I also really love jazz and blues and R&B. And I love both of the kinds of songwriting as well. So they're very different approaches to songwriting. The folk tends to be fewer chords and simpler melodies, and jazz tends to be a little bit more complex. But also those early jazz standards have such incredible lyrics, like the Cole Porter, Irving Berlin songs are some of my favorite compositions. So I try to do both when I write a song.
Another reason I wanted you for this show was that after I discovered you, I was just planning this episode with the theme of courage, and I found your song, Buck Up, which we'll play soon. Now, I assume from lyrics that was written pre-COVID, although it's really relevant right now. How did that song come about?
That record, so that's the title track from my most recent album, Buck Up. And I started writing that record right after Trump got elected, and it has a real theme of like sort of the feeling of doom and apocalypse that I found to be very pervasive right after that election and still. So and even before, to some extent, like we have a lot of crises on our plate right now, and they sort of continue to pile on each other. So the feeling of apocalypse and how to respond to it, I would say, has been my major theme of that record, and also of my next record, which will be out in the spring.
Yeah, I have to say, right after Trump was elected, I went into this 3-day spiral of depression, of which the theme was, we're all going to die.
Yep.
And I'm wondering,
Yep.
I'm wondering if the clock is running out. It still feels that way.
It does, yeah. And that song "Buck Up," I think, is a good example of a message I keep returning to in my own writing, which is the idea that whether we're doomed or not, you have to have courage, and you have to face it, and you have to try to improve things and try to be kind and make the world better, even if you are. So it's like there's a concept that if we're doomed, there's no point in trying, and I don't buy that. I think we might be doomed, and you have to try it.
Right. So what are you doing now? I know that you've been doing rent parties with your band, and you're active on Patreon. What are you doing to make it?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, one of the reasons I'm an artist is because making music and making art, and the creative process is my mental health practice. So that's been true since I was pretty young. And so when things get bad, I have to buckle down and focus on my work. And
Right.
that is what I did throughout the pandemic. And the one thing I'll add to that is that I've become a lot more politically active as well. So there's a few different organizations I've been working with and donating to, and I went to a lot of protests this summer, as did many millions of people. So I would say that the two things I do to stay sane are write songs, make records, and be part of the political struggle that's going on in this country and in the world.
Great. Well, there will be links to all your places placed with this show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just really glad to have you on. I'm happy to have discovered you. I have to tell you, I have to stay away from watching the John Prine thing because, like, I get verklempt all over again.
I know. How are we going to do it without him?
Yeah, really. So, thanks for being on, and we are going to soldier on. We're going to play pre-recorded videos of Buck Up, American Kid, and Fishin' With You, which is your tribute to John. So,
Cool.
So glad to have you on and to meet you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All righty.
Sounds like some of you know this song already. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much in advance for singing along, and thanks for coming to the show. I'm Carsie. Been lying awake and wondering where it all went wrong. We're running in this human race, but the odds are looking long. So I sat beside my hound dog and I looked into Make 'em laugh if you can't lick 'em. Keep on shining like an ocean. Keep on shining, it's a way to get 'em good. Keep on shining, honey, that'll get 'em good.
This episode features the saving grace of courage. But what is courage? A virtue virtually everyone wants to identify with, but not one person can truly define? Because to define courage would be to limit a virtue that invites most other virtues, if not all other virtues, to even exist. But that doesn't mean we can't try. Certainly, many people define courage in their own way. If you look at psychologists, for instance, they've developed numerous conceptualizations of courage over the years. Geller, a clinical psychologist and researcher, developed a tripart model of courage that breaks courage down into 3 subtypes: bravery, boldness, and fortitude. Bravery is the courage to face physical dangers and aggression. In its most extreme form, it's defined as the courage to intervene in life-threatening situations and/or risk death. It's our firefighters who run into the fire while everyone else runs out. It's our police officers who maintain safety and security. It's our veterans who fight to defend this country. And it's our doctors and nurses who right now are saving lives while putting their own lives at risk during this global pandemic. Boldness is the courage to face and confront situations that carry psychological risks. It involves being vulnerable and willing to explore the unknown and deal with issues one feels pulled to leave unaddressed. This could be the person living with trauma that finally goes to therapy because they realize they cannot do it alone, or the alcoholic who gets himself into rehab to achieve a sense of sobriety, or the individual who's been unfairly treated for so long that finally raises their voice and stands up for themselves. Fortitude is the courage to remain committed to difficult and emotionally demanding situations regardless of what may occur. It is the capacity to endure rather than withdraw from life's adversities. It's the single mom with 4 kids who went back to college later in life and is just about to graduate. Despite all odds, she made it through. It's the parents who lost their child and somehow managed to go on living without them despite how unnatural it may feel. It's in those moments when you are at your weakest, you are so close to giving up, but you do not let the pain of today rob you of the many joys of tomorrow. In essence, courage is not having the strength to go on. It's going on when you don't have the strength. In a more general sense, courage is the confidence to act in accordance with your beliefs and convictions. It's when what you think and what you feel lines up with what you say and what you do. It's being in alignment with yourself and calling yourself out when you're not. It's having the ability to draw upon bravery, boldness, and fortitude when facing life's trials and tribulations. I believe we are most happy when we are most our true selves. And I believe it takes courage to be that person, to let life break you free from the person you don't want to be and rebuild you into the person that you truly are. It takes courage to follow your heart. There is a quote that says, "One's life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." I couldn't agree more with that. I believe if you are fortunate enough to have figured out a way of life that expands you and fills your heart with joy, I believe you must find the courage to live it.
Maybe they know not what they do, but I wish they'd say what they mean. We stole this nation fair and square, and a whole lot of people in chains, but it was all for the glory of God, I swear, and the glory of capital gains. Don't look now, but it won't be long. They're gonna wonder what we did, and we'll have to admit that we done them wrong. God help the American kid. Oh, God help the American kid. And all the little kids all around the world, some have and others don't. But God loves all the boys and girls. God knows America won't. I hear him holler in my head. Can you hear that lonesome sound? Well, it may be true that we made our bed, but I ain't taking it lying down. Don't look now, but it won't be long. They're gonna wonder what we did, and we'll have to admit that we done them wrong. God help the American kid. Oh, God help the American kid. God help the American kid.
All right. Hi, Corinne. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Tameer. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm so excited to be with you today.
So excited to have you. So I just, from one mental health provider to another, I just want to say, reading your book blew me away. I was thinking, okay, I'd grade another self-help book on anxiety, but really I like this book so much because you don't have to be spiritual to read it. You don't have to be in therapy to read it, right? You just have to have anxiety. So really anyone or everyone can read this book.
That's funny that you say that, because I've also had people comment, this is going to sound negative, but it's a positive, where they'll say, gosh, I was reading your book just because I know your work, and I didn't think I had anxiety, but reading your book, I realized I did have anxiety, or I do. And the beautiful thing about that is to actually be able to put a name to what you're experiencing and recognize, hey, wait a second, I can now see this clearly, so I can work with it, rather than it just being this sort of, in the background sort of hidden thing. So it sounds initially negative, but it's actually a positive.
It is. Absolutely it is. I have a reading book weekly. I meet with some friends. We read these books, and I just remember putting it down and saying, you guys, you have to grab a copy. I mean, these are some crazy times right now, and we can all benefit from this. So actually, some of these friends they're in other countries, and one of them had asked, is there a Spanish version of this book? By the way, is there?
Not yet, but maybe at some point. So fingers crossed. Let's put good vibes out for that.
Yeah, one day we'll be looking for that one. But nonetheless, it's so great to have you here. So I just, again, from a clinical standpoint, I really appreciate the metaphors in the book. I know we always talk about the peeling layers of fear, of the onion, and you talked about like cushions at one point, just kind of on top of each other, muffling away love's presence, made it so relatable. And then just about the depersonalization and derealization.
Mm-hmm.
I know from a clinical sense, we tend to pathologize that. We tend to see that as disordered behavior. But I thought your take on it, you had a bit of a twist there where you saw these as tools for seeing things differently and correctly.
And to comment on that, for anybody listening who isn't familiar with those terms, derealization and depersonalization are these like psychobabble types sounding words, where it's referring to these feelings that people can get when they're having a panic attack, where you feel like you're not your body, or you're outside of your body. You feel like this isn't real. And although we pathologize those experiences, labeling them as anxiety or, part of a panic attack, in my experience, and with being a student of A Course in Miracles, it was like, wait a second, maybe actually we're hitting on something surrounding truth, but we don't have a means of conceptualizing what's happening to us. So it sounds like it's abnormal or bad, but it's actually touching on, the fact that this world isn't our reality and that we aren't these bodies. So I had to bring that into the book because it was a really important thing for us to keep in mind.
Yes, thank you for speaking to that. So again, I'll stop like complimenting your book so much, but I just want to say I really felt it was a practical application with actionable steps on overcoming anxiety. So that brings us to then the first question, given everything going on right now, how can we call on our inner resources to maximize the courage needed for these trying times?
Thank you for that question. Trying times indeed. I mean, my gosh, we have the pandemic that's been going on now for close to a year, which is hard to believe. An incredibly intense political time in the United States with the election and all of that. Race and racism, everything that's happening for brown and black bodies in this country and elsewhere. There's a lot going on. We are on a celestial speed up. No doubt. We are learning lessons at a pace that would have taken lifetimes, but we're getting them now, like within a day, the next day, a week. They're coming really, really fast. And so being able to tap into our courage and our inner resources is so incredibly important. And, you know, I have a lot of resources that I want to share. And I do want to mention for anybody who is interested in exploring race and racism, I do have a resource for that. It's called The Love Lens, which I can share about that later. But the piece that I want to speak to, you had asked me to speak about the pandemic. One of the important things is that we need to be where we are. As spiritual students, as students who are on any kind of self-help sort of pathway, we have this goal of how we think things should look if we got it. You know, if we're doing our lessons and if we're being spiritual, we have this idea of like, oh, when I'm there, I will look like I don't have any fear. I'll walk around not buying into everything that's going on. And that can become a bypass. That can become a very slippery slope. And so my experience, my whole journey has been about allowing myself to be fully where I am, not trying to bypass anything, but giving myself permission. If I'm feeling afraid, to feel scared. If I feel like I need to do something, to go ahead and do it. But the key is always to connect with a deeper part of yourself. I call it A Course in Miracles calls it the Holy Spirit. In my book, I refer to this part of you as your inner therapist. We need this part that comes from deep within us, which actually dwells outside of fear, to help us see differently, to help us be a vehicle for love, for expressing love, for miracles. So for me, the courageous piece comes from letting yourself be where you are and also really like looking and not avoiding. So if you are, again, having some fear come up, rather than turning away from that, turning toward it and taking a little personal inventory, like what is this fear coming up? What does it show me that I believe? And I know that, you know, I do a lot of this in my book where I really prompt people to make a laundry list of fear, like literally get out every fear that you can possibly think of and make a list. And you might be surprised that you might think it's going to be pages and pages, but maybe not so much. And when we do that kind of looking, and again, we're not looking with our self only, we're looking with this deeper part of our mind, we can start to go into a process of really transforming those fears and seeing those fears differently, relating to them differently. And so we can move into our courage and, you know, take action wherever it is that we are called to take action. So those are just a few thoughts that come up.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It takes that radical self-honesty piece that your book continues to push us to do, you know, with each and every prompt there, and knowing that we're not alone, you know, while we're doing it. It's such a powerful transformative shift in being that radically honest. And I love that piece about just meeting yourself where you're at, allowing yourself to be exactly where you are, but then realizing you're not alone, and there's a higher shift that can take place within you, you know, in terms of that shift in perception about, you know, as we call miracles.
Yeah.
In your book, you wrote cascades of miracles can happen just from a tiny bit of courage. And as you know, this episode, the saving grace that we're talking about is courage. What does courage mean to you?
I love that question because courage is a superpower. Like courage is everything. And courage means, again, that the inclination is to want to run away from our fear. The inclination is to feel something uncomfortable and to want to, oh, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to go there. Let me go distract myself. Let me go do something else. But courage actually enables us to pause and to turn and face whatever that discomfort is, to look with this deeper part of ourselves, with our inner therapist, and to get really curious about what it is that's coming up. Because again, when we start to do that, that changes our relationship to our fear. I used to struggle with really intense early morning anxiety. I'd wake up in the morning in bed and just feel like I would have gone to bed peaceful. Something happened in the night, and then I'd wake up in the morning and I'd feel this gripping in my chest and this just feeling of just angst and tension when I woke up. And I used to deal with it by just hopping out of bed and just getting on with my day and sort of distracting myself. But it kept showing up like every morning. And what I realized, what I started doing was being courageous and turning toward that feeling with spirit, with my inner therapist. So I literally in the morning would wake up, I'd feel it. And rather than jumping out of bed right away, I'd say, okay, Holy Spirit, all right, inner therapist, I'm going to sit here with this feeling, with you, and I'm willing to look. Show me whatever I need to see. I'm willing. And eventually what started happening for me, and it wasn't just like this like immediate, amazing transformation. It happened gradually over time. What I found was that the anxiety, that early morning tension just melted away. It wasn't really attached to anything specific that I needed to see, but over time, my relationship to that shifted and it stopped. It fell away. So courage is a superpower. Having courage to be curious, about our experiences, about what's occurring, even just not within our own experiences, but for the experiences of our brothers and our sisters who are, also on their journey and learning lessons and whatnot. I feel like curiosity and courage go hand in hand. And courage is just something that's very important to me because I feel like it's because of courage that my whole history with multiple anxiety disorders has shifted and has been largely healed. So
Wow.
Courage rocks.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I think we can all appreciate and learn from that. And I think that's such a powerful example you gave us, a personal example. There was courage in letting yourself have that experience and turning within, courage and being willing. Being courageous sounds to me like you're constantly willing to turn it over, to look at it with the highest version within you, your inner therapist. And it is a superpower. And I love, everything you're describing to it. So I'm going to watch this video over and over as we talk about it during these times. And that was touching. So thank you for sharing that. And I know you mentioned earlier, just all these resources in place. Did you want to, before we end, did you want to just kind of touch on what some of those resources might be?
I would love to share. And I actually have another just piece that I know that we wanted to talk about, and that was anxiety spikes. And I'd love to still talk about that too.
Yeah.
In terms of resources, I have so much on my website. I mean, obviously my book is a complete package because that is the process that I use to help heal. But recently I've written a lot and shared a lot on my website, which is FromAnxietyToLove.com, about coronavirus anxiety, about tools for dealing with health scares, because that was my number one anxiety trigger. This whole pandemic situation, rewind 10 years ago, and I would probably, if it was happening 10 years ago, or if I was in the mindset that I was 10 years ago now, I'd probably be like, hunkered down in my house, never leaving, never seeing anybody, petrified constantly. That's how I felt when the H1N1 swine flu thing happened back then. But it's very, very different for me now. So a lot of the things that I've learned, I've written about. And so I did want to refer people to my website if you're finding that you are being very triggered by coronavirus anxiety or just health fears in general. There's so many resources that you can use.
That was wonderful, and such growth and such transformation through the tools that you've shared. And people, still very much are in that state that you're describing you used to be in, when H1N1 was around, not leaving their house and in fear and panic. So I really, truly believe the tools that you've described and the resources that you have out there will really help them as well.
Thank you.
As well as myself.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And can I just add a quick tool for fear spikes? Because again, this is like another area that I know very, very well from years and years of experience. A fear spike or an anxiety spike is when you learn something and you get that jolt of like, what just happened? You might feel like your hair stand on end, or just that jolt of adrenaline through your body. Maybe your stomach feels like it hits your knees. And when we experience anxiety spikes over and over, obviously that gets really exhausting. So when they happen, I just wanted to share a really quick few steps for folks to keep in mind. Number one, remember to be where you are. I spoke about this before and how important it is to be where you are. And if you feel you need to do something to take care of yourself, to make yourself feel safe, do it without guilt. So be where you are. Ground yourself. So grounding, there's lots of different ways to do this. And again, the resources that I mentioned will give some suggestions. But for grounding, for me, it might look like listening to a spiritual song that's very meaningful. There's a song called It Is Well by Christine DeMarco. My friend Netta Boyne has a beautiful album. I think she just came out with a new one about so many songs inspired by A Course in Miracles, but I'm Not a Body being one of them. So listening to music like this can really help us step out of our fear loop into a moment of respite, of feeling grounded. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That might mean yoga, going for a walk, being in nature, whatever that looks like. We all get to decide how that appears individually. And then the third step is releasing. So again, being where you are, grounding, and then releasing. The releasing step is that willingness. It is that step of, I want to see this differently. This isn't serving me. This isn't serving anybody else. I'm willing to release this. Doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere right away if we're really caught in fear, but that's where really working on helping ourselves get grounded can be helpful with that step of releasing it and asking spirit for a new way of seeing. So I just wanted to offer that too.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And really, I feel like you're getting, once again, actionable steps, right? It's not just, hey, you're anxious, turn to love. You're really providing some solid tools here that we can all practice, every single one of us, and in ways that are really realistic and possible. It's possible to do all these things and to heal as a result. So thank you so much, Corinne, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Tameer. It's been so fun.
Absolutely. Take care of yourself, and
Thank you.
we'll be in touch. It's so good to have you.
You too. You too. Thank you so much.
Hey John Prine, thanks for the tunes, they were sweet as peaches, crazy as loons, always telling us how to be good to each other. You smart ass, smiling, nameless lover, but it's rough down here since we got the news. Might take a miracle to kill these blues. Everybody been crying like a little girl in the whole wide, big old goofy world. But tonight in heaven is a happier place. They were all sick of singing Amazing Grace, and now it's fish and whistle, lean on me. Everybody singing in harmony. Tonight in heaven it must be nice. They're all eating peaches in paradise, and all of them angels lining up in a queue just to go fishing with you, just to go fishing with you. Hey John Prine, just one more thing. You're the one who made us all wanna sing. You made it look so easy and look so fun. We'll sing a little sweeter now that you're all done. Please tell Petty we've been breaking down since. Merle and Bowie and Leonard and Prince. You got a pretty good band up there, I guess. We all wish you all the best. Tonight heaven is a happier place. They were all sick of singing Amazing Grace, and now it's fish and whistle, lean on me. Everybody singing in harmony. Tonight in heaven it must be nice. They're all eating peaches in paradise. All of them angels lining up in a queue just to go fishing with you, just to go fishing.
When I started to think about when I first needed courage, I was surprised by two things. First, how early in my life it was a necessary resource. And second, where I found it. When I was a kid, my home felt like a dangerous place. I don't mean that it was physically threatening, because no one in my family was violent and we were materially comfortable. But my mother had a severe bipolar condition, what used to be called manic depressive. In her manic state, she was a compulsive shopper and obsessive house cleaner, both of which she used to advantage in her freelance real estate career. And it's probably why I'm a halfway decent house cleaner today. In her depressed state, it was as if my mom was possessed by a dark and malevolent energy. In fact, she once described it to me as a possession. In that state, she would hide away in her bedroom for hours or even days on end. If she came out and spoke during those times, she was usually hostile or combative and sometimes delusional. Many times I remember coming home from school, opening the door, and feeling an oppressive, demonic energy everywhere, as if there was a psychic cloud of toxic smoke emanating from the room where she was hiding. I didn't have to take more than 2 steps inside the house to find out if my mom was depressed. The atmosphere of the house told me right away. On such afternoons, I would get out of the house as soon as I could and run into the woods that surrounded our property. My dad would get home a little bit later and start mowing the lawn or raking leaves or picking up tree branches, depending on the season. We had almost 5 acres of land, so he could always find something to do until dinner time. And that's how he avoided the psychic smoke inside the house. If I wasn't helping him, I would spend hours in the woods with my dog, where I found sustenance, reassurance, and a growing sense of who I was on my own, apart from my family. Although I didn't think of it this way at the time, I was finding my courage in the forest. In a very real sense, the woods were my actual home, where I reclaimed and repaired my native spirit that was so often threatened inside the house that was supposed to be home. Many years later, I became a writer, focusing on the ideas, disciplines, and teachings of what I now think of as spirituality without religion. For a couple months, I had the exceptional privilege of working with an African shaman and ritual teacher named Malidoma Somé. In one of the interviews that we did for 3 magazine features, Malidoma said something that has remained very important to me through all the following years. Too many people jump into spirituality as a shelter to hide from reality. It doesn't work that way. The way it works is for the spirit behind you to follow you wherever you go and show you how to face up to adversity. Now, there are a number of ways that people may use religion or spirituality to hide from reality. You might believe that you're going to a place called heaven someday, and that will be your final escape from the inevitable struggles of life on earth. So you try to behave in the right way, or at least believe the right things that your religion tells you will buy you some heavenly real estate in the hereafter. Or, if you're a New Age type, you may focus on reaching enlightenment. That's a kind of exalted heaven-like state in your own mind that will make you wiser than everyone else, not to mention anxiety-free. I've spent very little time looking for heaven or enlightenment. What I have done is try to stay in touch with the spirit behind me, as Malidoma put it, to help me deal with adversity from day to day. In that sense, courage is my spirit, or as Dr. Tameer put it so brilliantly earlier, courage is the virtue that invites most other virtues to exist. I'm still meditating on that one, by the way. It may take me a while to get it all. I guess that's what I get for hiring a co-host who's smarter than I am. Regardless of what you believe or practice, everyone is innately spiritual, and so everyone has some degree of courage. Even when you feel afraid or cowardly, you're aware of the option of courage, even if you don't always know how to put it into effect. While we sometimes have the luxury of a little time to plan how we will take a courageous action, the real test of the presence of our spirit is how we react when we're caught in the headlights, as it were. What do we do when we're suddenly faced with an unforeseen crisis for which we feel unprepared? Without a strong spirit behind us, we may want to cower or freeze in place or look for someone to blame or pray ever more feverishly to get the hell out of here and on to heaven as soon as possible. Without our native spirit showing us the way, we may even become depressed or delusional. With a strong spirit behind us, we will have a better chance of responding to adversity with creative solutions. That's because creativity and originality are just two of the powers of our native spirit. Right now, it seems as if the whole world has been caught in the headlights of a pandemic for months. And it's not lost on me personally that one of the causes of pandemics is deforestation, not to mention other environmental degradations worldwide. There is no China virus, but there is an ecological sickness that environmental scientists have been warning us about for years, and that we will be dealing with for decades to come. Now, how well we handle the current and coming crises will depend on large part on how creative we can become. That means we've got to maintain and maximize the spiritual presence that's behind us all. One way to do that is to go home, which is wherever we stand closest to our native spirit. The best use of prayer or meditation is, in fact, to take us home within, to the place that renews and strengthens our spirit, rather than trying to escape whatever calamity we're facing. And for me, as well as many others, one of the best places to renew and refresh our spirit is at home in the forests.
Lost in reason in my mind, evergreen in seasons black and white. Why did you run from the river? I know all the leaves will fall in time. Been lost in the haze of lost in a reason that